If you're buying it to get rich and get wealthy, you're going to be frustrated as hell. If you're buying it because you see that ultimately things are going to get very, very frightening before it's all said and done. I do believe that, whether it be with the banks, whether it be with the economy, whether it be with people hanging on to their property, whether it be with the accentuation of BRICS, whatever angle you're looking at it, the probability of these things happening are accelerating.
Bank stocks were lower Tuesday as the S&P downgraded multiple U.S. banks on growing liquidity worries. The BRICS nations are meeting this week to discuss expansion and the possibility of creating a new gold-backed currency. According to Andy Schectman, CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals, there is no better opportunity than now to buy gold and silver, as the world seems to be going upside down.
I saw a comment on a statement in an article that I read yesterday, and it was interesting. It was written, the statement was spoken from Herbert Hoover in 1933. He said, "We have gold because we cannot trust governments." And I think that that's part and parcel when you talk about what is the rallying cry behind this new this BRICS phenomenon. And whether or not we see fireworks coming out of the BRICS meeting this week, I think it's very obvious that the de-dollarization and the move away from the dollar is rapidly happening, which will only, I think, shine a light upon gold and silver and its importance in a new system, a system that lacks trust. And that's what gold is. Even Herbert Hoover said it, almost 100 years ago, that's why we hold it. And, it's an asset that is no one's liability. There's no counterparty risk. And in this environment, I think all of these phrases, risk and counterparty risk, these things are becoming more and more and more important. So I think you'll see premiums rise. I think you'll see demand rise. And when we talk about the banks, all it will take will be one bank failure with a bail-in. When the laws were written after the 2008 financial crisis, the Dodd-Frank law came out and said banks need to be bailed in, not bailed out. And as you continue to see this environment, as you mentioned, as the article said, higher interest rates and demand withdrawals. I mean, that article basically said the average savings rate across the whole regional bank landscape, over 4,000 of these banks, is less than 0.5%. Why would anyone stay in a too big to fail, or in a bank that is not too big to fail, a systemically risky bank that Janet Yellen said most likely from now on will be bailed in, as they should be, where you're getting 0.5% in a savings account or 4% in a one-year CD when you can go directly to the Fed at treasurydirect.gov and 6-month treasury and get almost 6%, or you can go to a money market in a too big to fail bank with daily liquidity and get over 5%. There's no reason to stay in these banks. And I think you will see that be a catalyst for all sorts of problems. And, I start to wonder a little bit. I read an article by a guy that I think is really great. And his name is Mike Savage, and he talked about what Thomas Jefferson said 300 years ago. And he said, if we allow the banks to control the money first by inflation and then by deflation, they will own everything. And think about this for a minute. I mean, you could argue the inflation part has already been accomplished. And you have all of these people who have loaded up on assets, stocks and bonds and real estate at artificially low rates. And a lot of them use debt to finance these things. And, what happens when things really start to slow down? And as rates continue to rise, you see the banks collapse as more and more people leave the banks in search of yield in a safer environment. And then you see an environment as rates rise where small businesses can't have access to capital, where they fail, where banks go under, where companies go under, people lose their job. And how do all of these people afford the maintenance of a 4% mortgage, or a $500,000 mortgage at 4%, which sounds great, but not when you lose your job. And when you see this type of environment with rising rates, which will foster an implosion in the economy and defaults, the banks then own everything at pennies on the dollar. It's very eerily similar to what Jefferson said, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks will own everything. But think about that. Inflation incentivizes everyone to speculate and take on more debt. When I moved down here to Florida 2 years ago, $1 million mortgage you could have got for 3%. That same 3% mortgage, that same payment would only buy you a $400,000 mortgage today. So as rates continue to rise, as values finally start to come into equilibrium with the rising rates, you're looking at a massive implosion in this economy. And the question is this what they want? I mean, are they looking to blow up the economy and own everything as people end up having to default in greater and greater numbers? And I think that is what's coming next. And this is a very scary environment where we're not buying gold and silver to get wealthy. We're buying gold and silver because the current environment of higher interest rates and rising rates and the possibility of all of these things happening with the BRICS and Saudi Arabia, who is expected to be a full member here today or tomorrow, be announced by the BRICS, moving away from the petro status. And you look at India, just did this massive deal in buying oil and not paying in dollars. This is a deal where these things never happened before. And I think that when you talk about moving away from the dollar, a country that continues to have massive deficits, 1.6 trillion this year, tax receipts that are dwindling, and ultimately a debt burden of almost $200 trillion. What's the government going to do? They're going to spend until the currency becomes worthless. This is a problem, and it's all starting to accelerate. And I think that that's why you own gold and silver. It is not to get wealthy. It is because it is wealth. And when you see the biggest money in the world, the most sophisticated money in the world, run to get it. None of these things matter. Premiums, they don't matter. The price today, it doesn't matter. The handwriting is on the wall. You just have to be able to see through it and get through the rhetoric and trust your gut like you always have. And I think in the end, this will make great sense to people who have bought it for the right reasons. If you're buying it to get rich, get wealthy, you're going to be frustrated as hell. If you're buying it because you see that ultimately things are going to get very, very frightening before it's all said and done. I do believe that, whether it be with the banks, whether it be with the economy, whether it be with people hanging on to their property, whether it be with the accentuation of BRICS, whatever angle you're looking at it, the probability of these things happening are accelerating. And this is why I think the biggest money in the world has been making an overt and methodical push to accumulate gold and silver, using the Western suppression of price to run cover. And, if you take a look at it from that angle, well, then you're not so disappointed by the counterintuitive action. You're not throwing up your hands and saying, what the hell, man? I mean, this was supposed to go up a long time ago. I'm so sick and tired of this. It's, blah, blah, blah. Well, I get that. But at the same time, are you really paying attention to what's happening under the surface? And I guess you have to understand that really big moves like this, Chris, really once in a generation moves. These are not things that are going to move quickly. They are things that are going to be very blurred or opaque in terms of the way they progress and the way they play out. What you get from the media, whether it be on one side or the other, you can take with a grain of salt. Again, misdirection of information goes not just to the public, but if I were the BRICS, I wouldn't be telling the truth to the West. And if I were the West, I wouldn't be telling the truth to the public about what's happening with the BRICS. These are all things that are all playing together. And, if we're going to say one thing about the BRICS, this meeting, to me, the biggest thing to take away from it is the union of the Eurasian Economic Union and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in joining together with BRICS.